Good afternoon, Xavier Basketball fans. This is Jim Reeker with the RaGing X Report. We're coming to you this afternoon. It's December 26th, the day after Christmas. Had to change our schedule up a little bit because of the holidays this week, but of course we wanted to get a report in. We're kind of here at the midpoint of the season. The out-of-conference schedule has been complete. Musketeers stand at 8-5. The record I predicted coming back from Hawaii at 3-3. And all they have in front of them now is the conference schedule, and we're going to talk about the two games we got in this week, last two games of the out-of-conference schedule. Then we're going to preview all the teams in the Big East, and at the end we will make some predictions about who's going to win it all, where the Musketeers might finish, and what the Musketeers' record might be. But without further ado, I'll welcome in my good pal, Bill Gabriel. So did you have a good Christmas, Bill?
I did, Jim. It was a great one. Got to see family. My nephew, who serves in the Navy over in Japan, was in. We got to visit with him, so that was just a great Christmas for everyone.
Yeah, I saw some pictures on Facebook of your nephew, Nick. Good to see that he looks like he's doing really well, and he got a chance to come home and spend some time with family. So, but let's get on to it. And, of course, the first thing we got to talk about is, man, if that was not the ugliest game we've seen in a long time from a Xavier team, and maybe the ugliest of this season, the game, when was it? Last Tuesday night at Missouri. Musketeers lost to the Missouri Tigers 71-56. We talked about Missouri's kind of a mid-range, we think, SEC team. And actually the score doesn't even tell the whole story, as they were down by 29 points at one time. If the wheels came off, it came off in Missouri that night. What were your takeaways from that game? Any positives or anything you want to elaborate on before we move on past this ugly performance by the Musketeers?
Well, I think it's the beginning of the Quentin Gooden maybe turning the corner. He scored his 21-point career high at that point in his career against Missouri. He had 6 assists. He had 3 turnovers, which, I don't know, when your starting point guard plays 39 minutes and he only has 3 turnovers, I think you can live with that, along with the 6 assists. So he was definitely a bright spot, and looks like he's starting to get a more aggressive approach to getting to the rim and better choices and shots for himself, while still delivering the ball to others to score, and which is 6 assists helps in that regard. But man, the other members of the 4 returning players, they cannot have a game where 3 of them basically disappear. And, I think Paul Scruggs was 1 for 7. Najee was 2 for 10. And then Tyreek, actually, he was 3 for 4. But the problem with that was he only played 16 minutes due to this foul trouble. So along with each, Paul had 4 turnovers, Tyreek had 4, and Najee had 3. So, that adds in when they're not necessarily always handling the ball the most, especially not Tyreek's 4 in 16 minutes. That's if he played 40 minutes, he'd have 10. So, got to have more out of those 3 guys for sure. And I just been watching the game, and many of the games here, they just need another person to step up and be some semblance of a scoring option. And I think that's got to be Keontae Kennedy, who seems like he's in the graces of the coaching staff right now and is doing a lot to get out there. I don't really see where he's, hurting them a whole lot, but he's got to start helping. And the same with Kyle Caslen. One of those two has to step up their scoring contribution for the Muskies to be a little more successful in those type of games.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on every point. My pet peeve, turnovers, 17 turnovers. Not going to win a game against a team of that caliber with that many turnovers, especially on their floor. Jones with 4, Marshall with 3, Scruggs with 4, Gooden again with 3. I do agree. I think Quentin Gooden is trying to be the leader And, of course, he's not had to fill that role for the last 2 years with all the leaders with Mikura and Blewett on the team before in his previous 2 years. And remember, Q didn't start really playing a lot until Edwin Sumner got injured about halfway through or even further along the line in his freshman year. But, yeah, the 21 points from him and a little bit of fire. A couple other things that really concern me. Jeremiah Tillman, their big man, 23 points, 10 rebounds, and we just did not have an answer. Again, part of that probably was the reason for Jones' fouls and the reason he was on the bench. But you'd like to have seen Jones and Hankins take it to him and maybe get him in foul trouble. In fact, going into that game, that was his issue. Jeremiah Tillman couldn't stay on the floor because of the same issue, fouls, but he didn't have that problem against the Musketeers. And, again, he did almost anything he wanted down low once they got the ball to him. Free throw percentage, of course, again. You know, a lot of times you look at some of these stats and you got to take in consideration that they were blown out and pretty much blown out early. I mean, if you recap, they were up 9-3 and then let the Tigers go on a 17-0 run where they just became turnover after turnover. And the thing that concerned me about them, they were many of them unforced turnovers. And after a 17-0 run, the game was, again, pretty much out of hand at that point. Maybe the most positive thing, and again, the debate's always going to be this year, no matter what they do, is Travis Steele the right guy? For the first time, I liked his press conference, his comments. We just didn't show up. We embarrassed ourselves. I'm not going to tolerate this. We got to make some changes. So I like kind of hearing that from him, that maybe he's going to put the hammer down. I thought some of the early losses he maybe made some excuses for some people, and I think now he realizes there's got to be some big changes. Again, it's an early season loss, but coming out, it was the last chance I thought that the Musketeers had to get what you would call maybe a signature win in their out-of-conference schedule. And I think if you go back and look, an 8-5 record, but they really didn't beat anybody of consequence, anybody that they can put a feather in their cap when it comes tournament time. So, but the out-of-conference is finished. I think we kind of realized that, new players, new coach, it could go this way. So, but anything else about the Missouri game before we move on to the final game of the season of the out-of-conference schedule?
No, I'm ready to talk a little Detroit Mercy.
Detroit, Musketeers 69, Detroit 55. Of course, this was an opponent that you thought the Musketeers should handle easily. But, of course, I didn't find out until you told me when we showed up that they were going to have to do it without two of their starters, Tyreek Jones and Najee Marshall. Much discussion on the Internet. Supposedly, the official word was Jones had knocked heads with Hankins the practice before. They didn't think he had a concussion, but didn't feel they wanted to put him at risk and put him out on the floor. And Najee Marshall supposedly having some back problems. And I do remember I was listening to Byron a little bit on the Missouri game at one point, and he said it looks like Najee is not moving well. Little conspiracy theory out there because supposedly Najee came out and warmed up, but then wasn't even on the bench, him or Tyreek, either one. Some people wondering if they were secretly suspended. Again, I don't think I wouldn't know why you would do that if you wanted to send a message or suspend them or sit them down. I guess the best way is you'd want everybody to know that they weren't playing for that reason. I don't know. Another thing that came out, I don't know if you saw this, Bill, that there was a tweet that Najee liked, I believe. He didn't actually tweet it, but he liked it. Somebody had made the comment that sure do miss Coach Mack, and he had liked that. And that wasn't up very long until it was taken down. But that kind of fueled the theory that maybe Najee's maybe not on board. And obviously, I think for him, and we'll talk about this, him and Tariq and Gooden and Paul Scruggs, all four of them, they're being asked to fulfill different roles, and I'm not sure that they've quite figured it all out yet and are ready for that. But let's talk about the good and the bad. The Musketeers did come out with a win. So your takes on the Detroit game, the Detroit Titans.
Well, the good was Quentin Gooden once again. Just a nice overall game. Took shots that were part of the offense, handled the ball, distributed the ball. Just had another great offensive night. The team as a whole shot their free throws very well. I think they were 73.9%, which is not a bad number from the charity stripe. The Ryan Welledge played really well, and I think they're just going to have to find a way to keep him on the floor more, again, even against good teams if they have to play a zone or something when he's in there. His shot, he's shooting the ball with a lot of confidence. They're just going to need him out there for that offense, and whatever they get out of him on defense, they get. The bad, missing 2 starters, I think really hurt them. Just especially rebounding. I think they were really struggling with some rebounding. And they just, they don't have that foot on the gas offensive mentality that, they all the time where, they kind of get in lulls where they're not attacking, not aggressive, and we got to take a quick shot here because the shot clock's expiring. We don't have enough time, so somebody tries a one-on-one thing, and so those are my takes. Not having Najee and Tyreek really, I think, campering them in some ways, and maybe help some of those younger guys who got to play some more, get some quality time, and hopefully they get a little better as the year goes on.
Yeah, I concur almost with every thought. A few additional. Hankins, 12 points, 11 rebounds, and he got to play pretty much the whole game. I think that was good. I've become a Zach Hankins fan. I almost think maybe he should start. I think for this team to have any success in the Big East, he's going to have to become an offensive threat as well as be a defender of the rim. So I was really encouraged by that. I was very discouraged with Paul Scruggs because they had 16 turnovers, but half of them were Paul Scruggs. He had 8 turnovers. And, Quentin had 5, so between the two of them, they had 13 of the 18 turnovers, and you just can't have that out of your guards. But again, Quentin had a great game, almost a triple-double. He had 22 points, 9 rebounds, and 9 assists. And, again, it's starting to get a feel that this is going to be his team, that he's going to become that leader. Again, it's a new role for him that he hasn't had to play the last 2 years, and I think he's starting to get there. We know that he can hit three-pointers and can be an offensive scoring threat, and I think he's going to have to be. And I think between him and Scruggs, Paul Scruggs is shooting like over 40% from the three-point line, but he is just a turnover machine right now. And so I think he needs to learn to take care of the ball and maybe slow down and let things come to him a little bit. But got to remember, Paul Scruggs didn't even start playing significant minutes till past this point last season. It really wasn't until about the last third of last year. So we're hoping that things come around. Yeah, Keontae Kennedy, I think, has kind of emerged as maybe the 8th option, and he got 21 minutes, 6 points. And I agree. I think, he's supposed to be a scorer. Hopefully the game's starting to slow down a little bit for him. And he can, give if he can give the Musketeers, 10, 12 minutes off the bench and score a little bit and not turn the ball over, I think that'll be a plus. And one other really positive was, going into the game, Antoine Davis was the second leading scorer in the country, averaging over 26. I think it was almost 27 points a game. And Quentin limited him to 19 points. And actually, I think he only had 8 points in the second half, and he went 8 for 24 from the field. And Quentin was, we talk about his offensive production, which was great, but you have to put that in with a defensive performance where he was chasing a little scat back guard around all night. So, Quentin's D, I think, was a positive from that. So again, it was there wasn't the game was it was one of those games where it kind of stayed close, but you never thought it was much in doubt. You felt like the Musketeers were going to pull away and win it. Of course, being a home game, that helped. And I think the Detroit Mercy Titans were like maybe the worst defending team in all of NCAA. I think they were ranked like 351. They were giving up over 80 points a game. So, but what they say, a win is a win, and it sent the guys home on a 4-day break, and now we can focus on the Big East. Any final thoughts about the Detroit Mercy game or the out-of-conference schedule as a whole? What's your feelings as they sit waiting the Big East schedule?
Oh, well, I say it's time to bring it on. It's now or never. Figure out what they're going to do. It's the time to play together as a team or see if they're going to continue to struggle to find their identity.
And it's going to be interesting because the Musketeers are obviously down. Remember, the Musketeers are the defending champions. A lot of people forget that. I've said that to 3 or 4 people in the last week or so. I said, who won the Big East last year? And everybody says, yeah, Villanova. I said, no, Villanova didn't win it. Even though they defeated the Musketeers twice, Villanova had 4 losses. The Musketeers only had 3, and the Musketeers were the champions of the Big East. Of course, everybody forgets that because the Wildcats won the national championship last year. But the Big East, it's going to be a different Big East. But just to remind you, last year the Big East had 6 bids. 2017 they had 7 bids. I'm going to say right now, I think they're going to have probably between 3 and 5, and if I was to make a prediction, probably only 4 bids. The good thing about the Musketeers is there is no one team. There was a lot of, the players who left this league, for a lot of them for the NBA or graduation. Everybody's kind of in the same boat. So it's going to be kind of an interesting fight to see. And I'm going to tell you right now that whoever wins this will be, at best, 13 and 5. That I can't see any team going beyond that, just because it seems like there's so much parity, and going on the road in this league is very, very tough. These are some of the toughest environments to play in all of the country. You talk about, Hinkle Fieldhouse at Butler or Creighton, they have a great home crowd, or going to Villanova. It's just every place has a home court advantage, and I think it's going to be, the word I heard is bloodbath. So we're going to go back and forth and talk about the different teams. But any overall thoughts on the Big East? Before we begin, I'm going to begin with Butler. We've divided these up, and we'll go back and forth and just give a little bit of a preview on our take on each team. Your thoughts of the Big East, Bill?
I just think that the Big East is really, Xavier is a microcosm right now of what the whole Big East Conference is going through, with probably one exception. And, I'll obviously have the opportunity to discuss that one exception here in a little bit, which is the St. John's. They're, undefeated, so they're the only team that doesn't have a blemish. But the rest of the Big East, it's like got these freshmen and trying to work them in, and we got a couple guys who weren't really the guys last year, and we're trying to get more out of them. And so it seemed like that was a repeating pattern. So, and I think that's why the league as a whole is kind of taking a hit. And as you said, I kind of felt that same thing. 4 or 5 teams probably this year getting in to the NCAA tournament just because of the parity and the regrowing pains, or the growing pains, I guess, that they're going through, replacing all their experienced veteran players.
All right, well, I'll kick it off. I will talk about Butler, the Bulldogs. Right now, the Bulldogs stand 9-3. Their 3 losses are to UD, St. Louis, and IU, so no terrible loss in there. They do have some fairly big wins, 2 SEC wins, one over Ole Miss and one over Florida. The Bearcats, I don't call them the Bearcats. The Bulldogs finished 6th last year in the Big East. returning players to look at, their leader is going to be 6'1" junior Kamar Baldwin, who right now is averaging 16.2. And then a guy who transferred there from George Washington last season has been putting up some numbers, 15.3 so far, and that's 6-foot guard Paul Jorgensen. And then they have a transfer who they were looking for big things from. He actually came from Duke, Jordan Tucker. He's averaging about 9 points. I think he's a down post lower player, but they're looking for some quality minutes from him. They lost, of course, their top scorer, Keelan Martin, gave them 21 points. But, Butler, they've had some coaching changes in recent years, but it seems like they're always in the mix and they're always a tough out. In fact, they've been kind of Villanova's Achilles heel the last couple of years. I think they've defeated them at least once, maybe twice one year in the last 2 years. I know that's always been a tough game for them. So the Butler Bulldogs are neighbors a little bit to the west. I kind of picked them to be, again, this is a hard, I don't know how you'd pick this. In fact, somebody said before the season started, and I don't think this is even true, that if you want to predict the Big East, you put Villanova at the top and DePaul in the middle and just guess the other 8. So, but the Butler Bulldogs, I think, they'll have some big wins, and I think they'll probably be somewhere in the middle of the pack. Who do you want to talk about there, Bill?
Well, I want to talk about. I might just talk about a team that may surprise everyone by finishing in that middle of the pack right along with the Butler, and that team. I'm talking about that last year's national championship team, Villanova. They are struggling out of the get-go here. They got a 9-4 overall record. They have their best win is a win on a neutral court over Florida State, who, if we remember last year, knocked out Xavier from the NCAA tournament, as well as had a nice run in last year's NCAA tournament. But they have losses to a loss to Furman, and that's just not something that Villanova should do. So I think that they are really struggling to rebuild. I know they had an exceptionally talented group of freshmen come in. However, that group of freshmen is playing around an average of 11 minutes per game.
Wow.
So they're not playing very much. So he's really dependent on a lot of role players from last year's national championship team and Phil Booth to kind of carry the team. I think Phil Booth has definitely risen to the occasion. He's playing really well. He's their leading scorer with 17 points a game. Their leading rebounder is Demir Cosby-Roundtree, and Phil Booth is also their leading assist guy. So, they're trying to get by without that. And I just caught something earlier today while I was checking out the internet, and one of those talented freshmen had made I believe it was a Twitter post or one of those social media platforms, and his statement was, there was a reason this was my second choice. So that has the media types who picked up on that, questioning whether he is looking to transfer somewhere else. And I believe his name was Javon Quinterly. And it just may be that at that time of the year for some of these guys who were exceptionally coddled, high-level recruits, and then they finally got a coach who has them in a situation where they need to get better and improve on the things that they're not good at. And, that's a challenge. So it could be that just kind of frustration with that process as well coming out in him. But really looking at what Villanova has done so far this year, I was having a hard time putting them much higher than about 4th or 5th compared to some of these other teams. Now, it doesn't mean they can't change that. I think any team in this league that gets hot for 6 games or so at the right time is going to find themselves sitting pretty. So when it comes to the final positioning. But I kind of see them not being in those top 3 this year compared to just what some of the other teams are doing right now and the talent that they have on their teams as well.
Well, and if there is one factor that remain constant, and that's Coach Jay Wright, who is considered one of the best in the business. So, I think just recently, within the last week, they played Kansas, I think, or it might have been a neutral court game where they only ended up getting defeated by, I think, 3 points. So with Jay Wright there, you never know. I think they'll probably be a team that gets better and better as the season goes on. And talking about good coaches, next up on my list is the Creighton Blue Jays. Greg McDermott, I think, is a very, very good coach, the style he coaches. But they've had some major losses. Lost their 2 top scorers, Marcus Foster and Kyrie Thomas. They do get Martin Krempel back, who actually, he's a big guy. I think he's about 6'10", but he does shoot some threes. He had an ACL injury halfway through the season, was out for the rest of the year. So he is back. Right now they're being led by a sophomore, Tyshawn Alexander, at 17.1 points a game. And if you look at the Creighton Blue Jays, played a pretty tough schedule, and they're 8-4 right now, and all 4 of their losses are to pretty formidable opponents, Ohio State, Gonzaga, who was number 1 at the time, and actually the Blue Jays gave them a decent game, stayed with them pretty much the whole game. They lost to their rivalry opponent, Nebraska, and also another usually tough team out of the Big 8, the Oklahoma Sooners. So they tied for 3rd last year, and I just know that Greg McDermott, again, he's going to have some guys that can shoot some threes. They like to play that up-tempo style and shoot a lot of threes. So, again, I think we're probably going to say this about every team. They're going to be somewhere in the middle, probably, just to get ourselves off the hook or come up with any firm because I think that's the way it could be. So the Creighton Blue Jays, again, tough place to play. I think it's one of the top 5 as far as records since that place has been CenturyLink Arena, I believe it's called, one of the top 5 toughest places to play in the country, so they do have that advantage. So the Creighton Blue Jays, again, I'm looking at them middle of the pack. A lot of people have them pretty low, though, because of the loss of talent there. Back to you, Bill.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep my reverse alphabetical order trend going here. Started with Villanova, and then next up will be Seton Hall. Seton Hall is currently 9-3. They are led by Miles Powell, who's averaging 23.1 points per game. Their leading rebounder is Sandro Manukalashvili. I'm probably butchered that horribly, but it's a definitely a very long last name. He's got about 7.8 rebounds per game, so a solid rebounder. And then they're led in assists by Quincy McKnight at 3.0 assists per game. Their big claim to fame this season is that they have beaten Kentucky. And on the flip side of that, their moment of shame as far as the media is concerned is their loss to St. Louis earlier this preseason. St. Louis is definitely a pretty good program, so it probably is not that glaring, but for Seton Hall, it probably, fans, it probably seems that way. But I think that this is a team that is going to push for the top of the conference standings, and they're going to be up there in that top, 1, 2, 3 position pretty much for the whole year. And then, however the losses pile out, that they're going to be standing there somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, that win over UK, of course, was big, and you're all right. St. Louis actually has been down for a few years, but this is one of the better teams they've had. They've since Rick Majerus left when they won the Atlantic 10 near the end of Xavier's run through the Big Ten. So, yeah, Seton Hall, at least, and they lost a lot. They had 3 or 4 players that were really, really good, been there for a while. Angel Delgado comes to mind, who was like one of the leading rebounders in the entire country during his tenure there. So, but I think you're right. I think they're probably going to be up near the top Another team I think that might be, I think I'd put them in at least the top 3 or 4 is the Georgetown Hoyas under Patrick Ewing. I think he did a exceptional job last year coming into a team that had been down for a few years. They are 9-3 right now, and they have probably the toughest big man in the entire Big East. Probably will be their leader in scoring and rebounds, and that's Jesse Govan, 6'10" senior. He's putting up about 18 points a game and over 7 rebounds a game. You know, that I think is going to be a big problem for a lot of the Big East teams, in the fact that we don't have a lot of big, powerful post players in the league anymore. And I really fear when Xavier, again, what Jeremiah Tillman from Missouri did to him, I can only imagine what Jesse Govan might do to them in the 2 meetings. The other 3 top players for Ewing are freshmen, actually. So he's had a good recruiting class. He has a 6-foot shooting guard, name of James Akinjo, is my best guess at his name there, 14.6 a game. And then you got Josh LeBlanc, who's putting up 8.5 points a game. He's 6'7" freshman, but he's almost near 8 rebounds a game. And Max McClung, a 6'2" freshman, is in double digits, 12.3. So I was impressed with Patrick Ewing last year. I wasn't quite sure. You know, we obviously all know him from his playing days at Georgetown and all his NBA years with the Knicks, how good of a coach he could be, but he was an assistant coach in the NBA for a long time. And I was impressed, and you know, I wouldn't be totally shocked if the Hoyas might not, you know, be able to win it this year. Their losses so far, Loyola Marymount, of course, not a big name anymore. Syracuse, which of course is a big rivalry for them, they lost to. I think they lost by a point to them, and they lost to SMU, who I think is supposed to be one of the top teams in the American. So that's the Georgetown Hoyas. I look for them to be close to the top this year. They finished 7th last year. I definitely see an improvement on that placement for them. Next.
All right. Well, we have the St. John's, coached by Chris Mullen, and they are the undefeated darlings of the national media. No, not really. There's hardly anyone talking about the fact that they're undefeated.
Not even ranked.
And not even ranked, yes. Which is, you know, totally attributed to the one thing that you can say about their schedule. It's not very strong. So they're that's no longer the strength of schedule. It's the Ken Palm ranking. Theirs is actually dropped as they've been winning. So the teams that they're beating are not doing very well as they play other schools and things. So St. John's, despite their 12-0 record, may very well be untested, untried, and or exactly what their 12-0 record says, which is a team that just knows how to win and is going to play really well. And, of course, if I had Shamari Pons, I'd be very confident in the fact that I was going to win a few basketball games because he's good. He's averaging about 19.6 points per game for them, as well as their leading assist person with 6.0 per game, and he is, I believe, their heart and soul. And, you know, if they need a big shot, the ball will be in Shamori's hands, and they will let him either shoot or pass off to somebody else who can make a hopefully uncontested shot for them in those moments. The biggest issue for them is that they have 4 players that average over 30-plus minutes per game. So the thing with that is you got to have to stay healthy, especially those 4 guys, because if you're dependent on them for that much, if you lose one, that could really hurt you. But it's working for them right now, and it may very well carry over and work for them into the Big East because they have a team that's confident, knows how to play hard. You know, we'll see what happens to them after they hit that first loss. because, with the quality of the competition in the Big East, that's going to happen. They're going to have an off night on the road somewhere and see how they rebound after that. But, I really think that this is a team that is going to push and challenge, and they're definitely going to finish in the top 25%, 30% of the league, somewhere in that 3-4 area. If not, if they play like they are doing, they may end up winning it all. So, but definitely a team to be reckoned with as they move into the Big East play this year.
Yeah, it's always hard to, judge an out-of-conference schedule. Of course, you don't want to play, too many tough teams and, get confidence down. But, you look at I remember looking through their opponents, and there's hardly a recognizable name of any what you would call a great program. So, but again, they got confidence. They're undefeated. And, of course, Chris Mullen has spent the last, what I would guess, 3 or 4 years trying to get that program back to relevance that it was when, of course, he played and they went to the Final Four. But early on in the new Big East, they were pretty much the bottom feeders. And so it'll be interesting to see. He took the theory, wanted to put some games on there they could win. And, yeah, Shimori Pons, I think, is most people are saying is going to be one of probably the candidates for Player of the Year. And I did watch them play. I think it was California. And they were playing in New York. I think it was a holiday tournament, and he came up with a driving runner that went in, and they won by a point, I believe, pretty much at the buzzer. So, yeah, anytime you got him on the floor, I know he's a high point man and exciting player. I think they have a chance. Well, I'm going to talk about the Marquette Warriors. The Marquette Golden Eagles. I always make that mistake. Back to the olden days. Sitting at 10-2 right now, and their 2 losses, number 1 Kansas and IU on the road. So their defeats are, nothing to be ashamed of. The IU game was a little bigger blowout, but that was very early on. I think it was in the first week of the season. And they have quite a resume of victories. Their rival Wisconsin they beat. They just knocked off Buffalo, and Buffalo was undefeated in that game, or coming into that game. I think they were like 11-0, and they knocked them off, beat them by about 10 points. They've beaten Louisville and Kansas State already. So the Marquette Golden Eagles, I think, are looking at a big season. It was interesting reading some of the season previews. Some people saying that Steve Wojciechowski might be on the hot seat, this being, I believe, his 4th season, and it was time for him, to really show some progress because they actually finished tied for 6th last year and really haven't, I don't think, finished much higher than that in his tenure there. Big question for the Golden Eagles is, can they play defense, because they can score. And, in fact, the only player of any significance they really lost was Andrew Rousey, but they have Marcus Howard back. Marcus Howard right now is averaging 25 points a game, and he can just go off. He's had 45 points twice. In fact, one of them coming just a couple nights ago against Buffalo. He's had 37 once, so he can score. And he's joined by Sam Hauser, 15 points a game, the junior who's actually leading them in rebounding. He's averaging almost 7 rebounds a game, and he's joined by his younger brother, who's only a freshman, Joey Hauser, who right now is averaging 10 points a game and 6 rebounds, and he's actually an inch taller than Sam being 6'8", Joey 6'9", and they're joined by Matt Held, who's 6'10", and Theo John, who's 6'9". This is probably the most experienced team in the Big East coming back from last year. But, again, the question is, can they stop anybody? Can they play defense? Because if you look at their scores, a lot of times they just outscore teams, again, because Marcus Howard can just go on a phenomenal run. In fact, somebody told me, I didn't look this up, somebody told me that in that Buffalo game he scored the last 26 points for Marquette down the stretch. So the Golden Eagles are going to be, I think, might be champions, and I definitely say putting them in the top 3 is not too far to go. So you should have one more, and then I'll finish up with the DePaul Blue Demons, since that'll be Xavier's first opponent in the Big East, and then we'll do a little trivia and be out for probably our last show close in 2018 here. So who do we got left on your side? One more team, and that would be
Providence Friars, who are currently 10-3, and it's the Alpha Diallo show for the Providence Friars. He's their leaders in points per game with 17.4. He's their leading rebounder at 8.5, and he leads them in assists at 3.4, which is unusual for Providence because they tend to have really good point guard play. But I think they have been trying to use a freshman, and he is hurt. So they've had to switch over to a older player who wasn't in that role a whole lot last year, and he's growing into it, learning as he goes as well. They have David Duke, who is the preseason co-freshman of the year. So there's some other talent around Alpha just right now that he is their guy. They have some couple losses that kind of, wishing they had back. They have a loss to UMass and Wichita State, which, if they're wanting a challenge for the Big East title, and those are teams that they should be able to beat if that's their goal, because, they have to beat teams slightly better than that in the Big East for that opportunity. And but they did wrap up their non-conference with a big win over Texas. But with that, being that dependent on one person to do everything for you, kind of leaning towards them finishing in the middle of the pack, somewhere in that 4 to 7 range. Not really having the ability, the talent to challenge and hold on for those top spots. So that's what I got on the Providence Friars.
All right, we'll finish it up with Xavier's opponent this Saturday up in Chicago at 2 p.m. That's the DePaul Blue Demons. And I think if you got to pick your first opponent going into the Big East, DePaul might be the team you want to play, maybe not on the road. But I think the Musketeers are going to have to be careful because they do have a couple returning players who gave them a lot of production last year and are leading them this year. Max Struss, I don't know if you remember him. He was a D2 transfer, and he is leading them again this year in points. He's got about 19.7 points a game. And then Eli Kane, their 6'6" point guard, he's averaging 14 points a game. Both have a lot of experience in the Big East. I think Kane is a junior this year. Struss, I think this would be technically a senior year. I think he played 2 years of Division II before transferring to DePaul last year. Of course, they got the new Wintrust Arena, which they opened up last year, caused a lot of excitement in Chicago. I think the program's headed in the right direction. Looking at them so far this year, they're 8-3, and you look at their losses, and they really don't have any bad losses, so to speak. They've lost to Notre Dame, Northwestern, and BC, all pretty much what we call Power 6 teams, and they actually early on beat Penn State. So Musketeers are going to have to be careful. In fact, if you look back last year, I don't know if you recall this, they only beat DePaul by 5 points at the Cintas Center, and then in a game that I went up and watched at the Wintrust Center, they only beat DePaul by 3 points last year up there, and that, of course, was with J.P. McKira, Trayvon Blewett, Sean O'Mara, and Karam Kanner. So, I don't think we can – I think you'll agree, we can't take any game for granted this year, home or away, any opponent. But I do want to say this is what I really like about the Big East. It's a 10-team league, and you play everybody twice. And so I think whoever comes out of this, again, bloodbath, as you might call it, will be a true champion. I like that format rather than, some of these leagues have gotten so big with the Big Ten and the ACC. They have, 12, 14 teams, and you don't even play everybody twice, so the schedule could be to your advantage or not to your advantage. You get a true champion coming out of the Big East with the round-robin format that they have. Everybody plays everybody, home and away. So that wraps up our preview of the Big East, and a couple things here we want to do at the end. We're going to make some predictions. 3 things I want you to give me, Bill. That's who do you think will win it overall? Where do you think the Musketeers will finish? Of course, those 2 questions might be the same answer, but I don't know. And what you think the Musketeers' overall record will be. So I'll let you go first, and then I'll give you my answers to those 3 questions. So who you picking for a winner?
Ooh, that's a toughie. I'm narrowing it down to one team. But just in looking at everything, I have to think Marquette. It really does stand a chance to win this thing this year. Just with their talent that they have, and the teams they played in the preseason really have prepared them for the environments they're going to run into. I mean, you go into Indiana and you don't play that well, but man, you talk about a away game to gain some experience on what it's like going into an unfriendly arena. You got it there. So I like them, and I think if it's not them, then Seton Hall's pushing right up there. And maybe comes in second with them or flip them around.
Okay, and where do you think the Musketeers will be?
Xavier, that's a toughie too. I looked at this thing and watching them play and just haven't seen that spark yet. I don't know when they're going to find it. Hopefully sooner than later. I'm wrong, but I really see them settling in maybe about 8th place. Probably lucky they can scratch out. I think they scratch out over 6 wins. That would be, maybe, we'll move them up. But man, they're going to struggle.
All right, so I got you with Marquette. Maybe who you said St. John's or Providence? Seton Hall.
Seton Hall.
Seton Hall. Okay, I'm writing this down. We need to make a bet just for fun here over like some cold beverages. Actually, I picked Marquette also. I've watched them a little bit, and actually we'll be going to the Xavier Marquette game on January 6th up there in their new Fifth Surf Arena. Second, I have to go with Villanova. I just think Jay Wright. I think he'll get things right before the season's over, and that this is the 6th year of the new Big East, as we call it, since the realignment, and he has 4 of those 5 championships. So he's proven. Although again, I don't think you're right in your preview. He doesn't have the players. I mean, he lost 4 guys that are playing in the NBA right now.
Yeah.
Jalen Brunson and Dante DiVincenzo. Man, I don't have to say his name anymore. Amari Spellman, I think, was a big rebounder, and there was another one that is not coming to me right now. But they lost a lot of talent, and I hadn't heard that maybe some discourse there with one of their freshmen. So we can feel for them. And I hate to say this, I'm being a little more optimistic, but I'm right with you. I'm just like, man, I don't know where this team could go. I mean, we talked about. There's some discussion on some bulletin boards. Will they even win a Big East game now? I can't see them going 0-18 because, but, there is a lot of unknowns there, and the wheels could come off fast. But I just think with the league, there's so much parity. I think everybody's kind of in the same boat, just not knowing what they have, a lot of new players. So I just chickened out, and I just went middle of the road. I picked them 5th with a 9-9 record, and I think both of us would probably be very satisfied if that plays out, because that means they would have an overall winning record going into it 8-5. So, well, it's going to begin Saturday. Anything else about the Big East or your thoughts on Xavier before we go to trivia? Can't leave the fans today without a little trivia.
Let's bring on the trivia.
Well, the other night, Quentin Gooden had 22 points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists, so he almost had a triple-double. But he didn't quite get there. But can you tell me, and you may have read this, I know you do a lot of reading on up to our shows, do you know the last Musketeer who did have a triple-double?
Ooh, last Musketeer who had a triple-double. Last Musketeer had a triple-double was
So obviously you didn't read this as I did.
No, I did not. I think it was last year, but I can't remember.
I'll give you a date just as a hint. February 17th, 2016. But I still don't know if you get it.
Yeah, probably not.
Miles Davis.
Davis.
On February 17, 2016, he had 11 points, 12 rebounds, and 12 assists. I kind of do recall that. I believe it was actually played at the Cintas. But, yeah, if I wouldn't have read that, I would have probably said Blewett or Nikira or somebody else, or maybe even going back deeper back into Musketeer lore. But, yeah, Miles Davis is the answer. I had to give you a tough one. I've been too easy on you here lately. So.
Yeah, that old Miles. Yeah, that
all right. Well, the other thing
surprised me.
The other thing that as a final is I was looking at the Big East schedule, and this is kind of unusual because it's very sporadic. Actually, on Saturday, there's only 2 Big East games kicking off the season. Actually, 2 teams, I don't remember who they are still playing out-of-conference games. And I think actually somebody plays an out-of-conference game still on Monday. And then there's a game, maybe one game on Monday and maybe one game on New Year's. Marquette plays on New Year's. In fact, I think they might play St. John's. So the schedule is very sporadic. I like the fact that the Musketeers have the out-of-conference schedule out of the way so they can focus on the Big East. We don't have a UC game in the middle or, every once in a while we have another big opponent we've played in the middle of the season. So, well, we're looking forward to it. Again, my old buddy that used to be on here used to say we have 3 seasons, the out-of-conference season, then we have the conference season, and then we have the tournament season. So we're moving into step 2, the conference season. I think, it's going to be very fun. So any final remarks before we sign off?
Oh, yeah, I'm just glad to be getting into the conference season. The intensity is going to pick up. The Cintas Center is going to be rocking. Hopefully the Musketeers can play up to that hope and expectations we all have for them.
All right. Well, we will sign off. Before we do, we want to thank Mike Goodpasture and the Grueling Truth Network for putting our podcasts out there on a lot of platforms wherever you listen to us, and I hope you'll continue to listen to us. And again, we hope the Musketeers will get things turned around here as they try to defend that Big East championship. Next week, we might come to you at an odd time, too, as New Year's falls again on Tuesday. New Year's Eve will be Monday night, so we will talk about later, Bill, when we're going to get together again. But until we do, we'll say go Muskies.
Go Muskies.